Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the lecture series Women on Stage, organized by the Réseau Art Nouveau network. My name is Zsombor Jékeli. I am the Vice President of the Réseau Art Nouveau network, and I join you here now from Budapest. I am the Deputy Director of the Museum of Applied Arts in Budapest, and I'm very happy to be here and represent Hungary and Budapest on this occasion. As you know from the program, we have a very interesting lecture today, which will be presented by Eszter Baldavári, who is already here, and I welcome her. Eszter Baldavári is an art historian, curator, architectural historian who works at the Hungarian Museum of Architecture. This is part of a larger institution, the Museum of Architecture and the Monument Protection Documentation Office. And she has worked on 20th century architecture and Art Nouveau architecture, published several books, including one on the architect Károly Gonda, especially his works in Shanghai. And more recently, she published a beautiful book on Albert Kálmán Kőrösi, an Art Nouveau architect in Budapest who has several buildings in near City Park. She also curated an exhibition on Albert Kőrösi, and we were very happy to work together with Eszter on many projects at the Museum of Applied Arts, in particular doing an exhibition about the waves of Art Nouveau, a photo exhibition of Art Nouveau architecture in the Danube region, which was done a few years ago. I can't remember when, but it was shown in many towns of the Danube region. So Eszter today will talk about a subject which is not exactly the focus of her research, but nevertheless, she has lots of new things to say about it. The topic is Undi Mariska, or Mariska Undi, to be more precise. And the title of her lecture is The Healthy and Independent Woman as a Phenomena in Mariska Undi's Art. And she will tell us who Mariska Undi is and what we have to know about it. But now let's give the floor to Eszter Baldavári, and I ask Eszter to share the screen and take over. So please, you can start.
And thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's really a pleasure, and especially because I can see many friends and many Art Nouveau lovers. So thank you again. I will talk about not only Mariska Undi's art, but the situation about women artists in the turn of the century in Hungary. Until the mid-19th century, Hungarian artists were learning fine arts in Western European academies. The National Society of Hungarian Fine Arts, founded in 1861, was initiating the establishment of the Hungarian School of Fine Arts. Owing to this movement, the Hungarian Royal Drawing School and Art Teachers College was opened in 1871, so 10 years later. Regarding the fine art schools in Europe, the Hungarian Royal Drawing School is different because its women class was financed by the government, and it was involved in the fine art school for men. So it helped the ecological and cultural emancipation of women. Between 1871 and 1908, around 500 women attended higher education of fine arts, and among them, 27 persons received teacher certification. There were anatomy, conception of aesthetic form, art history, style and morphology, later zoography forms, and geometry. But the methodology of geometry was missing from the schedule of women. At the same time, women had more theoretic lectures, such as literature or pedagogy. Furthermore, they didn't examine or research the ornaments of historical art styles, such as men did, but they were dealing with especially the Hungarian ornaments and folk art, made surveys of the object of textile, needlework, and pottery. Around 1900, as a new course, there was opportunity to study applied arts as well, where the students could shape form their own plans in different techniques of applied art. Although the art education admitted women to have career as an artist, but the genres of art remained inside the conventional handicraft, such as embroidery and weaving. Initially, the male artists and theorists also emphasized homemaking, so-called homemaking, as the main purpose of the women artists. Later, the students of the Hungarian Drawing School founded the Association of Women Artists. Their first exhibition was organized in 1909 in National Salon in Budapest. Mariska Undi was born as Mária Springholz in 31st of January in 1877 in Győr, which is on northwest Hungary. She started to draw in her childhood in 1893, thanks to the private teacher Béla Mendel, painter. After a year, Mariska prepared portraits of all the family members. Her mother, Mária Király, realized her talent, so all the family moved to Budapest to support Mariska's art education. The other siblings also attended different schools to spend the rest of the wealth of the family for studies. Mariska's education was led by the well-known Hungarian Bertalan Székely at the Hungarian Royal Drawing School. She was the first female student to graduate with academic honors. During the studies, as her way of thinking was inspired by the pre-Raphael, her favorite author was Walter Crane and the Hungarian Aladár Körösfői Kris, who was the main circumstances of Mariska assumed to be an art teacher in the National Teachers College in Subotica, Serbia, between 1900 and 1901. But she won a grant by her former school, so moved back to Budapest. And in this year, she took part in her first exhibition organized by the Hungarian women artists in Budapest. As I mentioned, Mariska Undi was born as Mária Springholz, so she signed her first works with her monogram S and M. Then from 1904, she used one of her maternal ancestors' surname, Undi. She started her researching travels in Transylvania, where she collected objects and motifs of folk art, and she learned applied art techniques of furnitures, the material of wooden, textile, and different colors. She succeeded in exhibiting furniture for children's room in 1903 in Budapest, but in 1904 she won the bronze medal at the World Fair of St. Louis in 1904 as well. After this work, she visited London for inspiration in 1903, where she got to know the arts and crafts and Art Nouveau endeavors. After her return to Budapest, she continued her folk art researches in Transylvania between 1903 and 1905. During her work, she collected numerous objects, embroidery, needlework, pillowcases for the Ethnographical Museum in Budapest. At the same time, she was going on with applied artwork. She was dealing with leather modern dyeing, leather applications, and burnout velvet as well. In 1905, she designed an interior of a studio for women for the Műbarátok exhibition, where we can feel the influence of the Transylvanian folk art motifs. The same endeavor led the architect group, the so-called young ones, So it is not surprising that Mariska had cooperation with the well-known architect Ede Torockai-Vigand as well, where Mariska designed the wallpaper, the rugs, and some leather application of the interior. Their room for girl had bone white maple wooden furnitures with morning glory patterned curtains, pillows, and blankets. She designed her own studio as well, what József Mocsai artist made. Around 1908, she lived in Paris, where her art was influenced by Art Nouveau art objects and graphic designs, but we will learn about these a little bit later. After her return to Hungary, she visited a Transylvanian village called Diód, where her favorite artists got together. During these years or meetings, she got acquainted with Jenő Boer, religion professor and philosopher, and they fell in love. However, after the marriage in 1917, they realized that their lifestyle is too different from each other. So after some years, they divorced. These years, Mariska got involved in the art colony of Gödöllő that followed the lifestyle of arts and crafts artists. In the beginning, Mariska only worked here as a weaver with her sisters, Carla and Jolán, but later she started to design dresses without corset, what was one of the most significant symbols of feminism of that time. While Carla remained as an industrial designer, you can say, Mariska regarded herself as an individual artist. Actually, she was the only woman in the art colony of Gödöllő who subordinated all the other things of life to her art. During these years, Mariska didn't move to Gödöllő, just had cooperation with them because she started her own workshop in Budapest. It was mentioned before that in 1903, she visited London. As she wrote in her memories, I visited numerous bookshops and museums where I was amazed by Rossetti, Burne-Jones, and Morris art and got to love this country where I got encouragement in simplicity, intimacy, and diligence. She was interested especially in book illustrations. She was amazed by Randolph Caldecott's and Kate Greenaway's art. Some art critics later called Mariska as the Hungarian Kate Greenaway. Greenaway's paintings were reproduced by chromoxylography, by which the colors were printed from hand-engraved wood blocks by the firm of Edmund Evans. Kate Greenaway's children in the books were put into trousers, both the boys and girls, which was probably also influenced by Mariska's way of thinking later. In the following years, she succeeded numerous awards, such as the bronze medal in the World Fair in St. Louis, as I mentioned, or the golden medal in the Milan International in 1906. In 1908, she visited Paris, where she attended at the private art school of Percy Tudor Hart. She practiced not only nude painting, but she developed color mixing and valor study skills. As Mariska writes in her memories, in the morning, I worked in his atelier, in the afternoon in my own one. Then in the evening, I immersed with great curiosity into the beauty of the Parisian life. I painted a couple of portraits here. All the paintings can be found in apartments in Paris. During the way back home, I had the opportunity to research artworks in Munich and landscapes in Switzerland. After her return to Budapest, she got proposal for a great work to prepare the wall paintings of the first lodging house or flop house called Népszálló, which was similar to the Roton houses in London. This was erected in Budapest. Here she could make good use of her studies from Paris. About the work, we will learn a little bit more later. And here we can see some pieces of her Art Nouveau decorations. All of these materials belong to the Museum of Applied Art. So it is really, for a researcher, it's a good thing if all these materials are digitized, and I really recommend this digitize the database, all of the researchers who are dealing with Art Nouveau. So on this slide, we can see how Art Nouveau and arts and crafts movement inspired her works. And we can find designs for tablecloths. And I don't know if my arrow is visible or not, but this one is designed for tablecloths. And this one is for pottery and some of wallpapers. And this is a tapestry, you can see. So we can feel that the style of drawing was inspired by the English illustrators, such as Walter Crane and Randolph Caldecott or Kate Greenaway. Around 250 paintings and drawings can be found by Mariska Undi in the Museum of Ethnography in Budapest. The items were made between 1920 and 1940 that contains illustrations about the folk costumes of the main regions in Hungary and Transylvania. But a little bit, before around 1904, she worked for the ethnographic department of the Hungarian National Museum, while she taught decoration painting, needlework, wooden burning till 1905. The collections of folk art in Transylvania influenced her later works as well. The materials and motifs appeared in her designs. For example, the restaurant and the smoking lounge of the aforementioned flop house in Budapest, the so-called Népszálló, where she designed 14 wall paintings with compositions inspired by village life. Later, in 1933, she prepared a 12-page long sketchbook with folk motifs to involve the handicraft into the official teacher education. In her volume, Magyar Hímvaró Művészet, which is in English Hungarian needlework art, for instance, she gives a historical overview, describes the techniques and materials used, and draws a tableau. It was intended for the general public and was even translated into English. The series she entitled Magyar Kincses Láda, in English Hungarian treasure chest, let's say, on the other hand, is a systematic scholarly treatment of embroidery and in the different religions of Hungary, of course, and it was published in 10 volumes. And one more picture about these folk motifs. I will talk a little bit later about these two compositions, but now we can focus on this, the Hungarian mythology, which was really important for Mariska art. And here we can see the so-called the hunt of the magic deer, which is one of the most basic myth of Hungary. Aquarelle painting was always part of her activity. Beside the flower studies and rural tableau mentioned above, Undi also painted cityscapes, gardens, courtyards, and gates, sometimes with small awkward figures in the foreground. Her series of the Taban, which is a quarter in Buda, preserved the houses and streets that no longer exist. She often took part in the exhibitions with works of similar subjects. Mariska Undi is remembered by her family as a person of firm character who preferred follow her own advice. She was an embodiment of the new type of woman who lived for art and chose independence. The sisters were different character, but Mariska's portrait of Carla, we can see on the left side, for instance, represents a woman in a geometric armchair with a look of staunch determination. Her first assignment came in 1908, the painting of the waiting room and the wards in the White Cross Hospital in Tűzoltó Street in Budapest, designed by Ibel Lajos, but unfortunately no longer exists. And she painted playing children and folk tale scenes on the walls, employing chiefly motifs from the Matyóföld, which is a region in Hungary. Her second great assignment was the decoration of the first homeless shelter in Budapest. The interior of this building, too, was destroyed, and we know about only a few plans are now in the National Gallery in Budapest. The job was difficult, and two accounts due to a childhood disease. One of her knees was stiff, Mariska's knees was stiff, which made a movement on the scaffolding difficult. The space didn't lend itself easy to decoration. The cafeteria was dominated and divided into three portions by very large pillars. The lower part of the walls were covered with Zsolnai tiles from the Zsolnai factory in Pécs, and she had to take their color scheme into account. Contemporary photos show, yes, you can see here, the flat compositions, strongly contoured figures, and no shading. Her subjects were, among others, an apple fair in Mezőkövesd, fishing boats on the Danube, shepherds in Zala County. I can show you the exact composition. This is the shepherds in Zala County, and harvest in Kalotaszeg. Mariska Undi was a follower of the GESAMKUNTWERK idea of Art Nouveau. Photos made of her in her studio are as good as a written Ars Poetica. In them, she poses in clothes of her own design among her paintings and furniture she conceived. In one of the photos, she holds a toy. In another, clearly visible, are objects of folk art she had collected during her trips, and her dresses is embellished with a fine piece of embroidery from Nitra, which is today in Slovakia. But unfortunately, these are unknown to us these days. All our information comes from contemporary descriptions, as in the case of the multifunction tea tables made of lacquered pine, wickerwork, and glass, which she designed for the club of the Művészet és Művelődés Nőegyesület, which is in English Art and Culture Women's Association. After 1910, she often designed furniture that incorporated the influence of Viennese secession. The furniture in her study and studio is emphatically geometrical. The chief ornament, for instance, of a cupboard standing in her study beside the decorative cutout of the door was inserted in the shape of an upside-down triangle made of tritic oak dyed green. The sideboard is built from prism-shaped elements. On the two sides of the upper portion there were trellises, very popular at the time, while the middle section was decorated with a row of square crystal windows. The side panel of the desk is decorated with intarsia. The cubicle armchairs were probably purchased in Vienna and designed by Koloman Moser or Josef Hoffmann. The pattern of the upholstery also resembles the motifs Moser used. The inspiration of folk art, of course, is also present. The furniture lacks the frieze of the front panels of the paint case and the desk. The covers, the sculptures, and the pictures on the walls were all inspired by folk art. The overall effect is rustic, thanks in no small part to the typical trait of Viennese furniture, the absence of exotic or rich decoration. And we can see in this picture the aforementioned photos where she was wearing costumes and dresses designed by herself, and also art objects. But as an excellent marketing manager, we can say she was not only the designer, but also the model of the dresses. Moreover, on the photos, some of other art objects like boxes and toys or an entire interior appeared, all made according to her design. She was a GESAMKUNTWERK artist. Every single object included furniture, textiles, and personal articles of the apartment were designed by herself. Hence, the aforementioned photos were multifunctional, portraits of Mariska, advertisements of the art objects and the interiors designed by her, and documentations for both Mariska and Aladár Székely, who was the photographer mostly. Undi was in the vanguard of female clothing reform in Hungary among the designers who claimed kinship with the Viennese fashion houses. Her 1911 essay in the journal Népművelés, we can translate it to popular education, shed some light on the significance of the issue of clothing. She said, women who at the end of the last century sought to better the life of their own sex with the work of their minds, who struggled to liberate their gender, didn't want to remain the slaves of the capricious fashion. They were looking for a kind of clothing that would be a permanent measure of beauty, structural truth, and functionality. The reform clothing of today is the fruit of these endeavors. Mariska Undi wrote several articles in support of the movement launched by William Morris, for example, whose aim was to reform women's clothing. In an article in the feminist journal, Nő és Társadalom, Women and Society, she in weights against the unhealthy bodies, wee hats and tight-fitting shoes. She recommends the reform dress as an alternative, which she describes as having two parts, a tunic and an overdress. She distinguished between two main classes of women's dresses that she called architectonic, the so-called architectonic wear, was made with the consideration of the female body, the rest taking the Greek peplum as its starting point, falling into the class of painterly clothing. As a dress designer, she adhered to the principles of the arts and crafts movement. She wanted to answer the same needs as those of architecture or literature. We can say, things are needed for harmony, beauty, formal truth, and functionality. The inspiration of folk art was present in her dress designs as well. The embroidered insert in her dress, in the photo already mentioned, is of a geometric shape. The idea was not hers alone. In Hungary, the tulip movement, the so-called tulipán mozgalom, actively promoted the use of folk art in modern apparel and furnishings, and Viennese fashion salon associated with the Wiener Werkstätte often utilized the ornate embroidery of various peoples of the empire. The early 20th century interest in folk and primitive art seems to have had the same roots as the discovery of the anatomous world of children. Teachers and artists were at pains to emphasize that education should start in the nursery, that children should be given attractive books and artistic toys. Undi endorsed these views, and her works for children, which reveal a high capacity for empathy and a practical attitude, constitute an important chapter in her work. As I mentioned before, Undi's first commission was actually the design of a children's room. Presented at the 1903 interior exhibition and then at the St. Louis World Fair, it compared favorably with other designs internationally, reflecting a careful consideration of needs and activities of children. She followed the constructive style of English designers of furniture and their understated ornamentation, while the accessories and the wall paneling bear richly figure of folk tale scenes. The cushions made with an applique techniques feature stylized child and animal figures. Undi's book illustrations were prepared almost without exception for children's book. Her illustrations for Régen, we can translate it to long ago, by Szikra, who was a writer, a woman writer, Mrs. Sándor Teleki, flow playfully around the text. Mariska had a great collection of toys, included Hungarian, German, Austrian, French, and Indian toys. What was exhibited in her glass cabinet at home, later she gifted the whole collection to the Museum of Ethnography in Budapest. She also designed toys, which were turned and painted wooden playthings like those made by the best-known German Schweiger and Hungarian Vilmos Vesely designers. Only a part of her award-winning suit, Péterke királyfi szekere, we can translate it as the cart of Prince Peter, has survived. For her aesthetic education was also important. She wrote her thoughts in 1928 entitled On the Way to the Future. In that, she emphasized the role of folk arts. These objects are still around the people, while the art objects of the ruling class can be seen only in the museums. So we can teach as a tools by with only these folk art objects. As she said, the school should educate creative minds, but those ones who are not creators can be the understanding ones of art who appreciate others' works. As her friend, the well-known actress MARISKA'S said, there are two types of people, artists and supporters. Who is neither of these shouldn't be alive. According to the documents and correspondences can be found mainly in the town museum of Gödöllő in Hungary, Mariska Undi was one of the most independent women artists because she took part in social events alone and got requests for quite representative works, such as the decorative painting of Népszálló, as we saw that. Her fashion designs were also the form of feminism and her way of life, where art was emphasized against the life of a wife or a housewife. In addition, Undi frequently published her ideas of art and the art concepts in the most essential feminist journal in Hungary, titled Woman and Society, and also in the well-known art journal titled Hungarian Applied Art, where a whole article was written about her oeuvre by Artur Erek, art critic, in 1912. Her friendships showed the same endeavor as well. Valéria Dienes, dancer, dance instructor, choreographer, and one of the first Hungarian women to graduate from university. In 1915, she founded a school, which she called Orkestika or Orkestics, incorporating her own ideas of motion, evaluating the interrelationships of dynamics, kinetics, mimetics, rhythmics. She created her own system to teach eurythmics and provide students with an understanding of the strength, space, expression, and time needed to create dance. An aquarelle series of dancers painted by Mariska Undi evoked the ballet costumes of a Russian master, namely Leon Bakst. Undi's interest in ballet and dance was probably reinforced by her relationship with Valéria Dienes. Undi visited Dienes in her dance studio on the former Széll-Kálmán Square, or now again Széll-Kálmán Square, several times, where the later gave instruction in the methods of Isadora Duncan and her followers. Undi even painted her portrait, though its whereabouts is unknown. Mariska Adler's friend was the famous and talented actress MARISKA'S, who started to work in her childhood. She was working in the Undi family's house in Győr as a maid. They played many times in the house when Jászai had some free time. Mariska writes in the memories that their favorite game was that the Undi children depicted a happy situation, for what Jászai acted a happy way, and then suddenly changed the topic into a sad situation, and Jászai started to cry and suffering. Although later Jászai became successful actress, they kept in contact, and Mariska painted her portrait as well, which can be found in her legacy belongs to the National Theatre. And on the last slide, we can see that who are the main researchers. I would like to mention, first of all, Katalin Gellér, art historian, who is dealing with the art colony of Gödöllő, first of all. And she kept contact with Undi Flora, who was the niece of Mariska, and she prepared many interviews with her, and they have a book. You can see the cover of this book about the whole family and especially about Mariska. The legacy is mainly in the town museum of Gödöllő, but we can find some toys in the Szóraköténusz Toy Museum and Workshop in Kecskemét as well. And when I started to deal with this topic, one of my friends, Albert Gesztesi, who is an architect, helped me a lot because he's not only an architect, but monument protection is really important for him. And he was dealing with an apartment building where Flora Undi lived, and he also made a number of interviews with Flora. And for example, I could imagine and I learned the personality of Mariska from Albert. So I would like to thank for them, especially for Albert and Katalin, for the help. And it would be really good to continue the research on Mariska's work, because we could see that it is a really multifunctional and really wide and rich which Mariska had. So thank you for everyone who was hearing and listening to my presentation.